Go out and ask any rider and they'll probably tell you that bigger is better. Like, we just can't help ourselves. We always want bigger engines, more speed, more horsepower, more torque, just kind of more everything. This is the MT10. It's the biggest bike in the MT series alongside the MT125, the MT03, the MT07, the MT09, all of which managed to be really, really fun despite having smaller engines. So this, being the biggest bike, has quite a lot riding on its shoulders. I have to say though, it's off to a good start because this is based on the R1. You know that 200 horsepower missile with a 1000cc cross-plane crank motor that sounds and feels and looks like a V4? Well, that's that, except with flat bars. Like any Super Naked, this thing's obviously been changed and tweaked a bit compared to the Superbike, and that's a good thing because you really, really don't want a peaky Superbike engine with Superbike gear ratios in a naked bike with no wind protection, because you have to ride it at Superbike speeds to have fun. And on a bike like this, with no wind protection, that means your neck's going to be back here and it's probably going to feel like your skin is trying to peel itself off your face. So they've changed that CB4 motor in the bottom end and the mid-range. It actually makes more power and more torque than the R1. It's only at about 10,000 RPM, where it tapers off slightly at about 160 horsepower instead of screaming up to that 200 horsepower mark like the R1. So how have they done that? Well, they've changed the compression ratio, they've changed the cylinder head, the camshaft and the timing. It's got a new bigger airbox over the R1, and it's also got a heavier crank, which is to make it more enjoyable on the road and a more enjoyable Super Naked with more character. So when Yamaha built this bike, their key development points for it were to be fast, explosive and agile, and my God, have they managed. This thing has got a shorter wheelbase than the MT09. It's got the same wheelbase as a much smaller MT07. It handles like a little wasp on speed, and then it's got that flipping glorious motor to just punt it out of corners the second that the bike is mildly upright. The mid-range is to die for. You get a load of howl from the airbox, and even though it doesn't redline quite as high as the R1, the top end on this thing is still nuts. If you on the pipe and you ride over a crest, you're probably going to be doing a wheelie. If you ride over anything bigger than an ant, again, you're probably going to be doing a wheelie. I mean, at the very least, this thing saves on front tyre wear. So you could probably call it practical and efficient too. As standard, the MT10 does feel a bit softer than some of the big Euro Nakeds, but without making excuses for it, I actually like that. We have this obsession with everything needing to be rock hard and track ready and just jarring. And if you want that, you can dial it into the MT10 because it's got fully adjustable KYB suspension, front and rear. But if it was me, I'd just leave it as is because it's so much more engaging to ride the way it is. It's a bit softer so you get more feel, the bike moves around a bit, and it's also got a load of chassis parts from the R1 like the frame, the subframe and a load of other stuff too. So handling really isn't an issue. Some of the riding modes have now been swapped around, so there's 3 different ones. You get standard is the least aggressive mode, and then A and B. B is the most aggressive on the MT10, whereas on the MT09, A is the most aggressive, so they've changed it around a bit. And as for fueling, this thing has no issues at all. No aggressive on-off throttle issues, no surging. What you give it the throttle grip is what you get from the engine. So how they made a Super Naked with R1 technology costs £9,999. That's £5 grand cheaper than the R1. Well, it's mostly stuff that you can't see. So there's no IMU or gyro system. So the 3-stage traction control system and the ABS is slightly less sophisticated than on the R1. The aluminium fuel tank gets replaced with a steel tank. The magnesium wheels get replaced with cast aluminium wheels. There's still a titanium exhaust can, but the collector box and the head has now been replaced from titanium to steel. There's also the TFT full color screen on the R1's been replaced with a normal black LCD screen. So yeah, some of the bling has gone, but do you feel like you've been robbed of £5 grand's worth of performance? Not really. Put it this way, the second you open that throttle, you'll be glad you got £5 grand in your pocket to spend on fuel and tyres. Well, on rear tyres anyway, because you'll be doing lots of wheelies. If I was being picky, I'd say the front brakes could probably be stronger. The initial bite isn't that strong, and it's probably the weakest point on the bike, especially compared to some of the other super nakeds like the KTM Super Duke, the Tuono, the Z1000, all of which have really strong one-finger brake action. Earlier I said that Yamaha wanted this bike to be fast, to be agile and explosive, but obviously they wanted it to be semi-sensible too, so one of the other key points was for it to be functional. So it gets cruise control as standard, and there's already a number of accessories that take this bike from being a one-track minded, speed, wheelie, really focused machine into being a bit more usable every day. So for starters, there's a screen that stops you from being blown off the back at really high speeds. There's integrated pannier mounts for semi-hard luggage. There's already an official Akrapovic exhaust to unlock some of that really cool cross-plane crank motor noise. And finally, there's a quick shifter too, which even though the gearbox on this bike is mega, I'd recommend having it just because the engine is so good. I reckon it will just really amplify how good it is if you can just keep punting up through that gearbox. Some people will be put off by the looks. Not everyone's going to feel comfortable riding around with that front end, but those who do give it a chance, those who do ride it, test ride it, buy it, I'm already jealous of, because this thing's got 210 kilo wet weight, almost 160 horsepower, 82 foot-pounds of torque, got a lot of cool color options, black, blue, this grey and fluo combination, and then a really cool seat that's comfortable and wide at the back and really narrow at the front, where you can get on it, slide around on the bike, get your knee down, hang off. It's just an all-round and exhilarating machine to ride. If you're still not convinced by that, then hold out for next month, where we'll be pitching this up against its competitors. In other words, the world's best super.